All right, guys and Briggs. Final review day. 16 questions. 8 of them come from quarters 1, 2, and 3. The last 8 are from our last 2 tests here in quarter 4. So I'm going to go kind of fast through these. Most of it's review. It's stuff that you've seen before. There's a few problems we'll spend a little bit more time on because it's things you may not have remembered as well. So number 1 wants you to complete the equation 6 to the 5th times 6 to the what equals 6 to the 10th power. So just remember 6 to the A times 6 to the B equals 6 to the A plus B. So you're just looking, what do you add to 5 to equal 10? And that's going to be 6 to the 5th power. So your answer is just 5. Number 2, factoring the expression x squared plus 9x plus 20. Your answer, because you're factoring, your answer is going to be 2 things being multiplied. They're both going to have an x in them. So basically, we're foiling backwards. And the way we do that is you're looking for numbers that multiply to 20 and add up to 9. So my options are 10 and 2, but those add up to 12, so those don't work. 5 and 4 add up to 9. So those are the 2 factors I'm going to use, and I just plug them into my parentheses. So my answer would be x plus 5, x plus 4. Make sure you don't put anything between the parentheses because you're actually multiplying those together. They need to be side by side. They need to be right next to each other. Number 3, another factoring problem, but this time we're factoring the radical. We're just looking for anything on the inside that we can pull to the outside. So in this case, I've got the square root of 12x squared. The square root of x squared, I know, is x, so that can go on the outside of the parenthesis. And then I'm looking at 12. I don't know the square root of 12, so I can't pull that out. But I know that 12 is 4 times 3. I don't know the square root of 3, but I do know the square root of 4 is 2. So that 4 can come out as a 2, which leaves nothing but a 3 underneath. So my answer would be 2x square root 3. You should have a square root in your answer. I don't think I've seen any of these that the entire radical pulls out. So you should have something left underneath. And it's going to be one of the factors of this number. I've seen things like the square root of, what's another example that we've done? Square root of 45x squared. So the x comes out, and then factors of 45, 9 and 5. I know the square root of 9, so that comes out 3, which just leaves me with square root of 5 underneath. So number 4. Find the value of x. This requires you to go back a ways and remember that the 4 angles in a quadrilateral add up to 360. So in any quadrilateral, if you want to put a formula in your notes, A, B, C, and D, if you take A plus B plus C plus D, you get 360 degrees. So in this problem, if this is a 90-degree angle, these are parallel, which means this is also 90 degrees. So 90 degrees plus another 90 degrees plus these 2 angles, x and x minus 36. If I add all those together, I get 360 degrees. So now let's just simplify. This becomes 180 plus x and x adds up to 2x minus 36 equals 360. So if I subtract the 180, I get 2x minus 36 equals 180. Add 36. So 2x equals 216. And then when I divide by 2, x is going to equal 108. So that goes in for this angle. X is 108. And then my other angle is x minus 36. So I just plug that in. 108 minus 36, and you get 72. So if I do 90, 90, 108, 72, those all add up to 360 degrees. Number 5, you're just solving a proportion. So you're just looking for the value of b. You start by cross multiplying. So you get 4 multiplied by 3b minus 1 is equal to 2 multiplied by b minus 1. So then you distribute. 12b minus 4 equals 2b minus 2. Minus 2b from both sides. We're trying to get b by itself. So 10b minus 4 equals negative 2. Add 4. Add 4, you get 10b equals 2. And when you divide by 10, that's going to equal 1/5. Make sure some of the answers come out as integers, regular numbers. Sometimes they're fractions. Just make sure it's simplified as much as it can be. So for this example, it would be 1/5. On your paper copy, your question, I think, comes out to be a whole number, an integer. All right, number 6, solve the right triangle. So you actually have to do 3 problems in one for this. First one, finding the measure of angle B. That's this angle up here. That one should be pretty easy because you know the angles add up to 180. And if this is 90, that means these two add up to 90, which means angle B is going to be 63 degrees. But now I have to find A and C. And the way that we do that is using some of the information that we already have. And going back to some of our special formulas here, our I'm writing that out wrong. Sohcahtoa. Remember, the S is the sine of some angle equals the O and the H, opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine of an angle equals the adjacent over hypotenuse, and the tangent of the angle equals opposite over adjacent. And I don't care how you remember this or if you just put it on your note sheet. You've got the Sohcahtoa Indian word or whatever you want to call it. You have some old horse caught a horse taking oats away. Some old hippie caught a hippie taking old acid. I don't care how you remember it. Just remember the order that those go in or put it in your note card. In this case, the angle I do know is 27. The 17 is adjacent to my 27. The A is opposite my 27, and C is going to represent the hypotenuse. So if I use this angle to find A, I'm going to use the opposite and the adjacent, which means I'm using tangent. So I'm going to say the tangent of my angle, 27, equals the opposite side A divided by the adjacent side, 17. And to get A by itself, from here, I just multiply both sides by 17. So 17 tangent 27, 17 multiplied by the tangent of 27. Before you hit enter here, it would be a good idea, go to mode. Make sure you're in degree mode. A few people are thinking it's funny to change everything to radians. You don't want radians. You want this to be in degree mode. So make sure you hit enter, put it in degree mode. And then we'll put in 17 times the tangent of 27, which gives me 8.66. And it wants me to round to 1 decimal place. So that's going to be 8.7. So that gives me A. But now I want to find C, which is right here. And I'm going to use the same angle, and I'm going to use this same side that I started with. So this time I'm using the hypotenuse and adjacent sides. So adjacent and hypotenuse uses cosine. So I'm going to say the cosine of my angle, 27, equals the adjacent, 17, divided by the hypotenuse, which is what I'm looking for, which is my C. And now I need to get C alone. So let's times both sides by C. And I end up with C multiplied by cosine 27 equals 17. And now I want to get rid of cosine 27. So I'm going to divide it away since it's being multiplied by c. So c is going to equal 17 divided by the cosine of 27. So 17 divided by cosine 27. And I get 19 point, again, I'm rounding one decimal, so 19.1. And that's your triangle. Probably the most difficult one on the test just because of how much is involved, how much you need to remember to do it. None of it's hard work. It's just a lot of parts and pieces to remember. So maybe try this one a few times on the review. Even if you get it right, do it again, do it a third time. Make sure you're really good at that process. Number 7, find the value of each variable. There was a rule that said if there's a quadrilateral inscribed in a circle, meaning 4 sides that connect inside a circle, that the angles opposite each other, or in other words, these 2 angles and these 2 angles, should add up to 180. So in this case, P plus the angle across from it, 53, should add up to 180. And Q and 90, these 2 angles, add up to 180. In this case, you minus 90 from both sides. So Q is going to equal 90 degrees as well. So Q is 90. And on this one, you minus 53 to figure out the other side. So P is going to equal 127. So just remember the 2 angles across from each other add up to 180 degrees. If you need to put that formula somewhere in your notes, just draw a circle, make a little quadrilateral in there, and put A, B, C, and D, and then write something like A plus C equals 180, and B plus D equals 180. All right, number 8 also uses a formula. We didn't use this as much in our class. The honors classes used it a little bit more. But it wants you to find the variable using these 2 chords, or in other words, 2 lines that cross each other in a circle. And we have this formula that Mr. McConnell had on his little Star Trek, Star Wars note paper that said if these are my 2 chords that cross, if I take A and multiply it by B, it should equal C multiplied by D. So in this case, this problem here, if I take X and multiply it by the rest of that line, which is 6, that should equal 15 multiplied by 14. So this just becomes 6x is equal to 15 times 14, which is 210. And when I divide by 6, x is going to equal, it wants me to write an integer or a decimal rounded. So if I do 210 divided by 6, I get 35. So I don't need to worry about rounding. X is just 35. And you're done. So again, another formula. As long as you know the formula, the problem shouldn't be too bad. So that's the first half of the test. That's all the old stuff. That's all the stuff that you should already know how to do. You've seen it. It's been a while, but you've seen how to do the problems. These next 8 are a lot more recent. So number 9 on the review wants you to write the standard equation of a circle. And remember, with center h comma k and radius, the equation of a circle goes x minus h squared, don't forget the squared, plus y minus k squared is equal to r squared. I don't even make you find those numbers in this problem. I give them all to you right there. So all you have to do is plug them in the right place. So x minus h, which is a -3, squared plus y minus k, which is 4, squared equals r squared, which is, in this case, is 8 squared. Don't forget the squares on these. You'll get the question wrong. And it's one of the only things that you need to do correct. So you're not going to get partial credit if you don't remember to do that. X minus 3 becomes x plus 3 squared, plus y minus 4 doesn't change. And 8 squared we can simplify to 64. From here, don't FOIL, don't move anything around. This is what your answer should look like, an equation of a circle. Just make sure you simplify the numbers once you plug them into that formula. So this might be a good one to have on your note card. Those of you that weren't in class today, you can use a full page of notes, not just a 3x5 card. So you should have plenty of room to have some examples and formulas on there. Number 10, not sure why all of these are shifted. A sphere has a diameter of 36 feet. What's the surface area? Well, the surface area of a sphere is equal to 4 times the radius squared times pi. So another problem, if you know the formula, you just have to plug the numbers in. In this case, all I need to know is the radius. It tells me my diameter is 36, which means my radius is 18. So my formula becomes 4 times 18 squared times pi. I'm not going to actually multiply the pi because it wants my answer in terms of pi. So I'm just going to do 4 times 18 squared. So 4 times 18 squared becomes 1,296. So 1,296 pi would be your final answer. Know that formula, plug in the number, simplify, you're to the answer pretty quick. Number 11, move this one up again. Number 11 wants you to find the volume of a square pyramid. Again, if you know the formula, the volume of a pyramid is just the length squared, and by length, we're talking about the length of the bottom. If I times that by the height, which is right here, and then I divide by 3, it gives me the volume. So all you have to do, plug the numbers in. L squared, my L, this is a square pyramid. So if this is 4, then this is 4. So 4 squared times my height, which is 3, divided by 3. Simplify, that becomes 16 times 3 divided by 3, which just equals 16. So that's like 4 questions in a row. You just plug the number in the formula, simplify, and come up with the answer. Number 12. One of my favorite questions on the test. It's a counting problem. A swim coach has 10 swimmers, and he's making a 5-person relay team. And at first wants to know, how many different choices of 5 swimmers does the coach have? So we're choosing 5 swimmers out of 10. And in part A, it doesn't matter what order they're in. So we're going to use NCR. So on my calculator, choice doesn't matter, order doesn't matter. And I'm choosing out of 10 people. And I need to use NCR since order doesn't matter. So out of 10 people, I'm choosing 5. And when I hit enter, I get 252. So there's 252 different 5-man teams this coach could come up with, or I guess 5 swimmer teams. Part B says the number of different ordered teams that the coach could create, given that order does matter. Basically what it's saying is if Briggs swims first in the relay, that might be a different team than if Briggs swims last. I don't know, maybe he gets cold standing on the side of the pool, so he's got to go first so that he's warm and can get done faster. Whatever the reason, the order of the swimmers changes the outcome. So now order does matter. So instead of NCR, I'm going to use NPR. And I'm still choosing 10 swimmers, or out of 10 swimmers, I'm still choosing 5. But instead, this time I'm going to use NPR since order matters. So 10 NPR 5 gives me 30,240 possible teams. So if I was picking 5 people, there's 30,000 different ways I could have those 5 people set up to race this race. Okay, so 30,240. Again, if you know the formula, well, this one you don't even need to know the formula. You just let the calculator do the work for you. 13. One to be careful of. The math, again, the math itself isn't very difficult, but the language is. It says over a 1-year period, 19% of cars need to be repaired once. So 19% have 1 repair. 5% are going to need 2 repairs. And 2% require 3 or more repairs. So 3 or more. And it asked me a few questions. First of all, what's the probability that a car requires no repairs? Well, 19% require 1, 5% require 2, 2% require 3. If I add those together, that's 26% that require 1 or 2 or 3 repairs, which means the probability that the car doesn't need repairs, I just have to take 100% and minus the 26% that do need repairs. And I'm going to get 74%. It wants it as a decimal, so you better put 0.74. So 74% don't need repairs. And I just got that by subtracting all the cars that do need repairs. Part B, I think, is the tricky one. What's the probability that a car will require no more than 1 repair? No more than 1 is kind of a mouthful. So let's ignore the no for just a minute. What's the chance that a car requires more than 1 repair? Well, these cars require 2 repairs. That's more than 1. These cars require 3 repairs. That's more than 1. Together, that's 7%. So 7% do require more than 1. But I don't want how many do. I want how many do not. So I take the 100% and I minus the 7 that don't. And that leaves me with 93% require no more than 1. I think it's a lot easier to find how many require more than 1 and subtract it than the other way around. And then the last one, 93%, it's going to want it as 0.93. What's the probability that a car will require some repairs? So what percentage of cars need any repairs? Well, that's just these 3 all added together, which we already found was 26%, so 0.26. So this one's the one to be careful of. I would try this problem a couple of times. Make sure you know how to come up with those numbers, and avoid the get help button. It gives you some awful advice as far as to solving this one. Number 14. In math class, 65% have visited the ocean. So 65% of people have gone to the ocean. 85% have gone to the mountains. And 55% have done both, have gone to the mountains and the ocean. And it wants to know, what's the probability that you pick someone that has visited the ocean or the mountains? So I'm looking for the probability of ocean or mountains. Remember, or means plus. So the probability of ocean people, that's 65%. And I'm going to add the probability of mountain people, 85%. But when I add those together, I end up with 150%, which is impossible. I can only have 100% at the most. And the reason that we have more than 100 is the ones that have been to both. Or in other words, 65 have been to the ocean, 85 have been to the mountains, but 55 are counted in this twice. So I actually need to minus the 55%. And I end up with 95%. So be careful on this one. Oceans, mountains, and both. You add the ocean and the mountain together. But just like the card problem where we did red or fours, you have to subtract the ones that you counted twice, which in this case was 55%. All right, 15. Gives you a table, men, women, managers, team members, and a bunch of totals. And it wants you to determine if events A and B are independent. So what you need to know about that is if event A and B are independent, and event A is the employee being a man and B is being a manager. So what it basically wants to know is it more likely that you get a manager if you're picking a man, or does it not matter? Is it equally the same? And to figure that out, to figure out if these are independent, you have to test two equations. The probability of A, B has to equal the probability of A, and the probability of B given A has to equal the probability of B. So we just have to test these two things. So first of all, probability of A given B. So I'm testing what's the probability that I get a man given that I've chosen a manager. So I'm not dealing with everybody. I'm only dealing with managers. So that goes on the bottom. 11 managers. How many of those managers are men? 7 of them. So 7 out of 11 chances of picking a man if I pick a manager. Is that the same as the probability of picking A, of just picking a man at random? So out of all the people, I have 55, and the men make up 35 of the people. 7 out of 11, that's already simplified. And I want to know, is that equal to 35 over 55? Put that in your calculator and you will find out that that's also 7 over 11. So those are true. Now I just have to test it the other way around. What's the chance of getting a manager if I'm only picking out of the men? So on the bottom, I'm going to put men, and total men is 35. On the top, I want the managers that are men. So there's 7 of those. And I want to know, is that equal to the probability of just picking a manager? The chance of picking a manager is there are 11 managers out of 55 people. So if I simplify these, this one right here becomes 1 over 5. And this one also simplifies to 1 over 5. So those are also equal, which means that these two events are independent. But it wants you to plug in the answers that we found. And be careful, because it wants it plugged in as decimals. So turn 7 over 11 into a decimal, plug it in, put 1 over 5, that one's 0.20 or 0.2. Plug those in, and you'll get the right answer. And the last one, simple calculator problem. 16 factorial divided by 13 factorial. Plug that in your calculator. I just do 16. Remember factorial, you hit math, go over to probability, and it's the 4th option down. Except for I went 1 too far. Math, probability. So 16 factorial divided by what? 13 factorial. Plug that in the calculator. You'll get the correct answer. I think some of the other classes did this by hand. They never saw how to do it in the calculator. So you should have a little bit of a head start there. Remember, test is on Wednesday, full page of notes, calculator's okay. And your test score, if you do really well, it'll replace one of your other tests from this quarter if you maybe had an off day or didn't do so well. So try this a few times. Good luck.